The Lord be with you. I'd like to welcome everyone. If people come in, we have a few seats on the next to last row, so that's okay. My name is Daniel Edwards. I'm on the Adult Ministry Committee. I'm welcoming you to the last adult forum of the summer. Next week is the fall kickoff. God willing, we will start at 9:40 in the sanctuary with songs and rally-like activities, and then send the kids to their Sunday school classes. Afterwards, in kind of the rest of the Sunday school hour, and then after church, we'll have a ministry fair. There are little cards that are on the entry to the gym. There's tables set up in, again, God willing, the TK Young Room. You'll be able to see the different offerings that the church has, adult classes on Sundays, and then also other classes throughout the week, and other ministries and opportunities for service and connection. Please come and check it out. We're going to have 3 Sunday school classes this fall, which will start the week after that. We'll start with prayer, and I'll introduce the speaker. Today's prayer comes from the 25th Psalm. Let's pray. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all day long. Be mindful of your mercy, O Lord, and of your steadfast love, for they have been from of old. Do not remember the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. Amen. Our speaker today is the Reverend Dr. Stephen Haynes. He is a theologian in residence at Idlewild Presbyterian Church, which is this church. And he's a professor of religious studies at Rhodes College. Welcome, Dr. Haynes.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm wired up in a variety of ways.
You're part of the building.
I'm connected to the building. I hope you can hear me.
A little bit over this way so that people can see.
Oh, hey. So I hope you can hear me all right. Let me just say first, thank you for all of you who have been praying for Elise. You may have heard that she had a stroke on July 20th. She is doing well. She's resting. She's recovering. She doesn't have any lasting symptoms. But we do want to figure out why it is that she had a blood clot that went to her brain, obviously. So she's going to be wearing a heart monitor and having some other tests. But hopefully we'll figure that out, and we'll be confident that we can avoid such events in the future. It was pretty scary. Really appreciate those of you who have contacted us, been in touch in other ways, brought food. It's been really nice not to have to worry about that. So Brady and I and Christy and Matthew and Elise are doing well. So thank you for your thoughts about that. So I'm changing gears a little bit. I'm talking about liberal arts in prison. You may wonder why this topic. The answer to that question is, since 2016, I have been in charge of Rhodes College's Liberal Arts in Prison program.
Sorry.
I don't know if I can stay there, so I'll try. I'm not really good at staying in one spot. At any rate, since 2016, I've been working with the Liberal Arts in Prison program. What is that? Basically, the way this happened is very serendipitous. I got an email in 2014 from a colleague in Nashville who works at Lipscomb University. I had not known this about him, but he had been involved in something called the LIFE program. Lipscomb, I forget what it stands for, it's an acronym, Lipscomb's prison program, and he asked me if there was anybody in West Tennessee who was doing this work, because he worked with women at what at that time was called Tennessee Prison for Women in Nashville. There was a women's prison here in Shelby County, Mark Luttrell Correctional Facility. He wondered if there was someone who could offer the sort of courses that the women in Nashville were getting here in Memphis, because they didn't have access to the internet. Well, that surprised me, because I just assumed everybody had access to the internet. But they didn't. So I did some research, and I found out there was nobody in West Tennessee doing this work. In fact, there was nobody really in Arkansas or southern Missouri or northern Mississippi. Really, between Nashville and St. Louis was kind of a dead zone for higher education and prison. So at the time, I was at an age where had become pretty clear I was going to be at Rhodes the rest of my career, which is not a bad place to be. But you get there's that moment where you think, I want to do something that's going to leave a mark here. I want to do something that's going to occupy me and inspire me the last years of my career, so that I'm not doing the same thing for another 10, 15 years that I've been doing for the last 25. So I started to think about how Rhodes might develop its own program in prison education. Oh, good to see you. And to make a long story sort of short, I volunteered at 201 Poplar at the Shelby County Jail with some students to teach a class, not GRE, that's the wrong thing. What is it called? GED. It's not called that anymore, though. It's called the high set. So GED, high set prep class. And that was interesting, but it became very clear this was not the kind of environment you want to do higher education in. It's very transient, it's very noisy, it's very violent. About that time, somebody from the Tennessee Department of Correction found out that I was interested, drove from Johnson City just to meet with me at the Mark Luttrell facility, asked what I had in mind, and I said, I don't know, maybe teach some kind of great books course, because that's part of our curriculum at Rhodes, the search course, it used to be called the MAN course, and it is kind of a staple, kind of a signature part of our curriculum. He said, sounds great, when can you start? I said, this is in May. I said, well, I guess we could start in the fall. She said, well, that's great. One little thing, we're moving to Henning. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, where the hell is Henning? I've lived here for 30 years. I've never heard of Henning. Henning is up the river, about 60 miles in Lauderdale County. If you've ever been to Fort Pillow State Park, you've been past the Henning prison. On the other hand, if you've never been to Fort Pillow State Park, you've definitely never been by the prison. One of the things about prisons that I've learned is they're very strategically located in the middle of nowhere, so that nobody has to ever see them and think about what goes on inside them. Anybody know where any other prisons are in Tennessee?
Near Shelby Farm.
Yeah, that's a big exception. So there's a federal prison there, there's the Shelby County Jail East, and there's Mark Luttrell. So you're right. In fact, I ride my bike on the Green Line, so I go by there all the time. But most prisons are pretty remote, and so they're not part of our sort of urban landscape. This is what the West Tennessee State Penitentiary looks like in Henning. You can see that it's laid out. There are two sides. One side now houses women, the other houses men. Each has about 1,000 beds. So we decided, those of us who were interested in trying this out at Rhodes, we decided to start what's called the Great Books Reading Group. And we, as it turned out, because this was the fall of 2016 and the prison was just becoming a women's prison for the first time, we were in on the ground floor of what was going on there, so that was very exciting. So this had been a men's prison since it was built in 1990. The idea was, since more and more women were being incarcerated in Tennessee, and they were more and more often in county jails, they decided to make one large facility for women where it would be gender specific in its programming. So that's what the Women's Therapeutic Residential Center, which is the right side over there of West Tennessee State Penitentiary. By the way, this is an acronym-rich environment, that higher education prison. I get frustrated all the time in meetings. I say, please don't use acronyms. People in this field and probably all state bureaucracies use acronyms like crazy. I have no idea what they're talking about. WTSP is West Tennessee State Penitentiary. WTRC is the Women's Therapeutic Residential Center, which is the women's side of WTSP. With me? Those are the easy ones. Okay. So we started in 2016. We put out the word what we're doing. Had about 70 women who applied. We chose, I think, about 25 to be part of this reading group. We decided to bring together texts that we at Rhodes were familiar with from teaching search for years, classical texts, going back to ancient Greek and Sumerian civilizations all the way into the 20th century. And I put out a call to my colleagues, anybody who wants to teach a text that they're interested in, sign up to do it. And so they did, and so we started this program. It became very popular. It became popular with faculty. It became popular with the students who were incarcerated. And so it also became clear pretty quickly that what they wanted was a 4-credit program. That they wanted to do real college, they wanted to do it for real credits, on real transcripts. And so I put together a proposal that I brought to the faculty in 2019, which was approved for a certificate program that would involve 4 courses designed along the lines of our search program at Rhodes, which is a 3-semester sequence. So we spread a 3-semester course sequence into 4 courses in 4 semesters, and created a certificate of liberal arts that students would get if they finished these 4 courses. We started that in the fall of 2019. Our first graduating cohort was spring of 2021. We had 5 students graduate. Then last summer we had 7. Last May we had 7 students graduate, and we're now recruiting for our 3rd, I guess our 4th cohort. We have a new cohort. We replenish the group every year, and I heard the other day that there are more than 50 who are applying for 10 or 15 spots coming up in the new cohort. So increasingly the problem is, how do you accommodate so many women who are interested in this program and who have colleagues or friends or cellmates who have done it? How do you distinguish between those who are capable of doing it and those who aren't? How do you distinguish between somebody who's really capable and has 3 years left on their sentence versus somebody who's really capable and is a lifer and is never getting out of that place, probably? How do you take those things into consideration? So that's kind of a little background. I'm going to give you some statistics. I'm going to give you some acronyms, some more acronyms, and I'm going to try to give you a sense of the larger landscape of higher education in prison. It is, as I've learned, it is a large landscape. It's very busy right now because of some things that are going on in the Department of Education. So please stop me if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How can this benefit Rhodes students?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get to that. That's actually a question that came up pretty early on, because my focus was really on providing something that the incarcerated women did not have. And it was not on, how is this going to benefit Rhodes students? Over time, that's changed, and I'll say more about that in a minute. Okay, so here's some statistics you may or may not have heard. The one that's really the most striking is that the U.S. has 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. We could probably spend the rest of the hour talking about that and what it means. There are lots of explanations for that. One of that's very popular is by Michelle Alexander, who wrote a book called The New Jim Crow, and it's basically, her argument is that mass incarceration, what people call mass incarceration, particularly of black and brown people, is an extension of Jim Crow, which is an extension of slavery, that some of the same factors are involved. You could also talk about the war on drugs and the way that's affected people. 95, this is another one that's very sobering. 95% of incarcerated persons will return to their communities. So most of the people who are in prison, including those you think should be there and you hope will never get out, are going to get out probably. And the question then becomes, well, what are they going to do when they get out? Where are they going to live? What are they going to do for a job? How are they going to make money? How are they going to affect our communities? There's a crucial moment in the history of higher education in prison, which was the 1994 crime bill. I don't know how much you followed this particular legislation, but it was significant in a lot of ways. It was an attempt for the Democrats to take away the soft on crime sort of charge that had been made against them. For years they were going to be tough on crime. So in the crime bill, they decided to give a lot of money for prison building, and they took away eligibility for Pell grants from incarcerated people, right? Up to that point, Pell grants are grants from the federal government based on need for people to go to college. And there were, up until that time, 350 in-prison college programs, basically, that were funded by Pell. They all dried up after 1994 because there was no financial incentive from public universities and colleges to provide those programs. So After 1995, they were just 12, so basically the landscape was completely depleted. And what happened shortly after that, in 2001, there was a sort of revivification. I shouldn't have started to say that word. There was a coming to life again of this phenomenon of higher education in prison. It started at Bard College in New York. An undergraduate named Max Keller decided that he wanted Bard to be involved in prison education. He started a program, I think, at Sing Sing Prison. It spread, and now it's become this huge initiative, huge consortium of colleges, mostly private liberal arts colleges that self-fund. In other words, some use Pell money, but basically it's part of the mission of the college, and they have kind of begun to revivify. There we go. This field. And now what's happening is, as I'll say more about in a minute, Pell grants are being reinstated for incarcerated people. This will come to fruition next summer, 2023, and it's going to change things dramatically because now the financial incentive that used to be there for a lot of schools to be involved in this is coming back. And so we're already starting to see a lot of schools become involved in higher education in prison that haven't been involved before, don't really know what they're doing, aren't really sure what kind of classes are going to work and so forth. So
I'd be interested to know how it got back. Sounds like a good thing.
it is a good thing. It's one of the few things, maybe the only thing, that the Obama and Trump administrations agreed on. And it was a program that started in 2015 under Obama. It's called the Second Chance Pell Initiative, and it was continued by the Trump administration and also by the Biden administration. So maybe the only thing that all three administrations agree on. So yeah, it's certainly been a bipartisan, multi-administration move, and it's very significant. I'd say people who work in higher education in prison are ambivalent about it, because in some ways it's going to help expand our services, but in other ways it brings a lot of players into the field with the motives to make money. It's a time in higher education where a lot of schools are really challenged to make ends meet, to find enough students, and if you're near a prison and you have a lot of students who are eligible for Pell money, it's a pretty predictable source of income. So here are the countries with the largest numbers of prisoners as of July 21, just in case you were thinking that maybe there was some smoke and mirrors about the number of prisoners in the U.S. The United States of America has 2 million, this is in 21, this is in jails and prisons, 2 million, almost 2.1 million. China in second place. How about in terms of, relative to their population? The United States still way out in front. 707 out of every 100,000 people are incarcerated. I noticed China's not even on this thing, which is kind of surprising. Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Turkey, including a lot of sort of quasi-authoritarian states are on that list. It's not something to be proud of. And I don't know all the reasons for it. I'll just say at this point, I'm not an abolitionist. There are a lot of people who work in this space who call themselves abolitionists. They believe we should not have prisons, that if they ever have a purpose, they've served them. They do more harm than good. I'm not one of those people. I think people should be in prison. And interestingly, most of the people I work with, most of the people incarcerated, think there should be prisons too, which is an interesting fact. I do think, however, that our criminal justice system has been messed up to the point where people serve ridiculously long terms for often nonviolent crimes and even some violent crimes, especially when they're young. There's a lot of evidence that people sort of mature out of that kind of behavior, but they don't get any credit for that. They stay in prison. So,
money is a large part of it too. If you have enough money, you can get away with crimes.
If you have enough money to get good defense, you're much less likely to go to prison. There's one of our students who committed a crime when she was 19. She had a plea deal that I think offered her 20 years in exchange for a guilty plea. She decided that she could do better than that. She was 19. She had a public defender. She got 91 years for non-lethal crime. She's still there. She's 42 now. Yeah, and I'll say something else about it, because this just really is the thing that really got me. So I went to her clemency hearing a year ago, and what was striking to me is that the people on the Board of Parole and I forget what his full name is, probation and parole, did not want to go on record as being critical of the criminal justice system, even though this was a clear example of a miscarriage of justice. They said, well, I don't want to second guess the criminal justice. Well, that's your job. That's what you're supposed to be here to do. And they kept saying to her, why did you take this plea deal? I wanted to stand up and say, because she was 19 years old, she had bad representation. So there are some features of the criminal justice system that perpetuate mass incarceration in ways that are really unfortunate. Started this by saying, I'm not one of those people who believe we don't need a prison system. I think we do, but I think it's gotten out of hand. This is prison growth between 1950 and 2016. You can see it was pretty flat for between 1950 and 1975, about 200,000 people, and then went up astronomically. Peaked about 2009, I think, is the peak, and it's been slowly going down, but of course there's a long way to go. In Tennessee prisons, I don't know why this is highlighted, there's nothing significant for me on that, but here are the prisons in the state. There are, I think, 16 of them. This is the facility we work in, West Tennessee State Penitentiary. Females, there are 1,068 beds, 770 inmates. The other places that house women are the Bledsoe County Correctional Center, which has about 150, and the Deborah Johnson Rehabilitation Center used to be called Tennessee Prison for Women, which has about 643. So about half of the women in the state of Tennessee who are incarcerated are in our facility. And you see the total there is about 20,000 felons. The Tennessee prison population by race and gender, it's about 90% male. Probably shouldn't surprise anybody. Anybody surprised by that? Most of the crimes we hear about, most of the violent crimes are committed by men. About 10% are women, 56% are black, about 40% white, 3% other. The interesting thing about West Tennessee State Penitentiary, though, and particularly the women, on the women's side, it's about 70% white. And I find this really interesting. I expected, given my research, that I would walk into a prison setting and it would be overwhelmingly African Americans, and it's not the case. What is true is they're overwhelmingly poor. These women are from East and Central Tennessee, mainly. They've grown up poor, they've gotten involved with drugs, or they got in an abusive relationship. They may have been criminally negligent in the death of a child, and they're incarcerated. Because they're in Henning, they don't have any family nearby to visit them. Even some of the women who have graduated from our program have not had any family members who could make it from East Tennessee. State prisons reflect the demographics of the state, not the area, right? So this is not reflective of Shelby County. If you go to the Shelby County Jail, it's overwhelmingly African American. But this is a different sort of arrangement. Tennessee prison population by age, I don't think there's any real surprises there. Most of the people are in their 30s and 40s. We do have a few women in our program who are over 60, and they're not getting out of prison. And so, as I said before, one of the sort of dilemmas is how does it make sense to invest in people who are not getting out of prison, right? So whatever they learn, whatever they gain from the program is not something they're going to be bringing back into society. However, it certainly enriches their lives, and it also can enrich the life of the prison. One of the women in our program who's graduated from our program but now serves as site director is in prison for life. She contracted to have her husband killed. I don't think she's getting out unless she gets clemency. But she is a remarkable woman who basically runs our program from the inside and is there every time, brings, makes sure things are set up. She's like our AV person. She's our, does all the sort of communication with the principal that we need. That was a great investment on our part because it's been something that's given her sort of something to live for, something to focus on, but it's also benefited us a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Steve,
Yes.
do you have a sense of what the entry age is, just ballpark? Is it usually people who are in their 20s?
Yeah.
Is there any?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's usually in their 20s. There are some people who get in when they're 15, 16, and 17. We had a woman who was finished our program last year and was paroled. She had been in there since she was 16. And there are a lot of people in prisons who go in as teenagers. Octavia, the woman I discussed before, got 91 years. She was 19. Yeah, but I'd say generally 20s, early 30s. It's unusual to have people go in later than that because people have usually sort of established a kind of way of life that's not going to get them put in prison. Yeah. Oh, by the way, yeah. So, sorry. So here's incarcerated felon population by primary offense in Tennessee, about 20,000 total. I found this interesting that the biggest category is homicide. 3,859, 293 kidnapping, just under 3,000 sex offenders, 2,000 robbery, 2,500 property offenses, and assault, drugs, and others. There is a sort of line of argument that most people in prison are there for nonviolent crimes that are drug-related. That's not the case. That's not my experience. At least in prison in Tennessee, most of the women in our program are not there for drug offenses. They're there for violent offenses. They're there for violent offenses that probably have extenuating circumstances. I don't know all the details, but when people kill their husbands or an intimate partner, or they're held responsible for the death of a child, there are obviously other things going on. But it's not as simple as saying, we should make marijuana possession legal and the prisons will empty out. This is not the case. So the incarcerated women in Tennessee, the numbers have just skyrocketed. They're going down a little bit in the last couple of years, but notice that in 1993, it's not that long ago, there were just between 600 and 800, and that number has now gone up to almost 3,500. So the female incarcerated population has increased much faster than the male population all across the country in recent years. And I don't think anybody knows quite exactly why that is, but it's something that people have gotten very, very alarmed by. And one of the reasons why the WTRC, the Women's Therapeutic Residential Center, is a gender-specific women's prison that has things like a family center where family can come visit and spend the weekend with their mothers. Children can come spend the weekend with their mothers in a kind of protected space that looks like a kind of combination between a Holiday Inn hotel room and a nursery. They have a therapeutic community for people with drug problems. They have a lot of real focus on treatment. So parole rates are, I don't know what you would predict, but about 50% of people get parole. It goes down some years. I'm looking at this. Let's see. Oh, look at this area here. Sometimes it goes down 36, 24, 24. Gone up a little bit in the last year or so. I think that's because of COVID. I will say, though, that the parole experience is a humiliating one for people. I've been to several parole hearings. One of the things that people are charged with doing is going over the details of their crime, reliving every minute of it. I've had people come out of parole hearings that I've been at crying, saying, I hope you don't think less of me because of what you just heard. I think the point is to try to get them to be aware, become aware of the knowledge of what they've done. But trust me, they're very aware of what they've done and what the consequences were. And sometimes parole decisions and clemency decisions are very arbitrary, and it's hard to really see what the criteria are. It is a political. It is full of political appointees, and in Tennessee that means Republicans. So what you find is a lot of people who want to be perceived as tough on crime, who don't want to be the person who paroled someone who, who reoffended. And so there's a real caution. And I mentioned again Octavia's situation where if you're not going to give clemency to somebody who's spent 25 years in jail for a non-lethal offense, and by the way, her boyfriend, who was her co-perpetrator, took the deal, and he's out of prison. And he came to her clemency trial and testified on her behalf, said she needed to be out. He was the main person who was responsible, didn't sway the parole board. So facts about higher education in prison. So this has been researched a lot by groups like the RAND Corporation. And so we know that within 3 years of release, 2 out of 3 people are rearrested and more than 50% are reincarcerated. So that's recidivism. The recidivism rate in the United States is about 2/3. That's stunning, right? You would think, this is the way I think, right, as somebody who's never been in prison. If I ever went to prison, the one thing I'd be sure about is never going back, right? Figure out what I did to get there and make some changes. This is not the case, and there's lots of reasons for that. People have argued that prison is actually criminogenic, that it teaches people how to be better criminals, but it infantilizes them so they have no skills when they get out. We have women in our program who've never used a cell phone, never seen a cell phone. They've never used a computer. They've used computers now because we have them in our program, but they have to be walked through the process of doing email and things like that. So imagine somebody like that getting out of prison and trying to, apply for a job or something. Persons who participate in correctional education programs have 43% lower odds of recidivating. Recidivating, I think that's the right word. That's pretty remarkable. That's research done by the RAND Corporation. And those rates go down if somebody actually gets a degree. Odds of obtaining employment post-release are 13% higher if you've had any post-secondary education. So it doesn't mean a certificate or degree. It just means you were involved in a program. Yeah.
Hey, sorry to make you go back for just a minute, but I'm curious about that study because it does seem like to be a pretty significant reduction in recidivism, but is there a non-random assignment to the groups? So there's a selection criteria for getting into the program, and
Yeah.
is there a selection bias in the results?
I don't know. I would direct you to the RAND Corporation website.
You see what I'm getting at? Though?
Yeah.
Like we pick the people who are going to maybe not risk.
Yeah, so it really is, it's there. RAND Corporation is a 2013 study, and it's easy to find, and you can download the whole thing, and I don't know the answer to your question. But yeah, and this work has been, is tested by other groups, and it's a consistent finding. And so I think this is one of the reasons, as I said earlier, Trump, Obama, Biden, all these administrations think it's a good idea. This is one reason why, right? No matter how you look at it, whether it's like this is good for human beings or this saves money, it's a win-win, right? Every $1 invested in prison-based education yields $4 to $5 in taxpayer savings. This is one reason Bill Lee is such an advocate of criminal justice reform and prison education. He's poured, whatever you think of Bill Lee, he has poured a lot of money into prison education in the state and reentry services. And for whatever reason, I don't know what his personal story is, but he came into office believing that this was something that Tennessee really needed to be a leader in. So the educational attainment gap, only 64% of people in prison are academically, 64%, I guess, take out the only. So 64% of prison are academically eligible. In other words, they have a GED, a high-set degree, or high school diploma. But most people, only 4% have an associate degree, 1% have a bachelor's degree. So this is a very rich environment for people who are eligible for higher education, but have not ever been exposed to it. 93% of colleges don't provide higher education in prison. So Rhodes is one of the 7% of colleges that do, which I'm very proud of. So I mentioned these dates already. 2015 was the Second Chance Pell Experimental Sites Initiative with 67 participant colleges. It was extended in 2020, mainly to community colleges. So Dyersburg State was one of the places that became part of the 2020 extension of the Pell Second Chance Pell program. Nashville State Community College is another one. Lane College in Jackson is part of the Pell Reinstatement Program. Schools like Rhodes and like Vanderbilt and other schools, Lipscomb, that are doing this work have not been, to this point, part of the Pell Reinstatement Program. But in 2023, that will be available to us. One of the things that we have to think about is how do we figure out all the bureaucracy and all the paperwork and the rules that go along with government funding. So do we need a person on staff just to sort of oversee, Pell grants from our students? How do you get incarcerated people to fill out FAFSAs? FAFSA, whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about if you have kids, right? This is the free something.
Application for federal student aid.
Yes, that. Yeah, it's free, and if you filled it out, you've got to be there with your laptop open and your checkbook and everything, and have all this financial information. Incarcerated people don't have any of this, and so if you're going to have them apply for Pell, they're going to have somebody help them through that. There are also rules like if they drop out, the college has to pay the money back to the government. And the attrition rate in our program is very high. It's between 30 and 50%. And this is because people are paroled, sometimes out of the blue, in the middle of a semester. People are transferred. This is another thing that happens to us. The Women's Therapeutic Residential Center is where you want to be if you're incarcerated in Tennessee and you're a woman. Where you don't want to be is the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center in Nashville, according to the women. So guess what? If you mess up at WTRC, guess where you're going? You go into Nashville. So they transfer people quite a bit as punishment. Well, once you're transferred, you're out of the program. And people just get overwhelmed. They have jobs. They have families on the outside that are going through things. They get sick. They're old. Their bodies are breaking down. The medical care is atrocious. Denise, the woman who's our psych director, has told me, unless I'm dying, I'm not going to Nashville for medical care. I'll stitch myself up. I'll, find a way to deal with a broken bone, because all the medical care of any, that these people have access to is in Nashville. You go to Nashville, you stay in a cell for weeks waiting to see a specialist, away from all your support network without any books or anything. And it may not be the best of care. And so for all these reasons, people drop out of the program. They get overwhelmed. Okay. So there are lots of funders for higher education. Yeah?
Do you have people drop out because they just can't manage the material?
Occasionally, and it happens. And we've had to expel one person through the years because of chronic cheating. So that happens too, but it's pretty rare. And people do drop out because they get overwhelmed, but it's usually the material in combination with stuff that's going on in their lives at home with their kids. Imagine what it's like to have a teenager, which I don't have to imagine, but imagine what it's like to have a teenager and all the teenager stuff's happening, but you're completely separated from them, right? You have a child who's living with their father or your parents or something and going through all these things, and you have no way to really be involved in their life. So this is something that weighs on people a lot. So here are some of the foundations that fund higher education prison. We've gotten money. Rose got money from Lumina Foundation in St. Louis. I'm working on a proposal now for Ascendium. We've applied for money to the Mellon Foundation, which is one of the biggest foundations that has started to fund higher education in prison. So there's also got money from the Community Foundation of Memphis. When I just started out, I got about $4,000 for buying books, which was pretty cool. So there are two different models of prison education, two general models that I want to share with you. One is the inside-out model. And this is the model that I originally thought we would use because the prison was right down the road, so it made a lot of sense. So this was going to answer the question, how do Rhodes students get involved? Because the inside-out model is you take 15 or so students from campus, you cart them off to the prison, and you have class in the prison with 15 or so students there. and you do that once or twice a week, and it's a remarkable kind of classroom, unlike anything either of the groups has ever experienced, right? But when the prison's in Henning, that's not logistically possible, right? So there are, this inside-out model is all over the place. They do teacher training quite a bit. They're very involved in taking professors who are interested in this and kind of immersing them in the world of higher education in prison. The model that we follow is the Bard Prison Education, Bard Prison Initiative model. Here are the groups, here are the colleges that are part of the Bard Consortium. We're not officially a part of the consortium because we don't offer a BA degree. And this is one of the requirements that they have. But these are colleges and universities that will be familiar to you: Wesleyan, Grinnell, Goucher, Notre Dame, Wash U, Bennington, Yale, Emerson, Villanova, Augustana. These are all colleges more or less like Rhodes, private liberal arts schools that often are self-funding. In other words, they don't see this as a revenue stream. This is an extension of their mission, and this is something they do because it's the right thing to do. The thing about Bard that I really like and that was convincing to me was the way it was described to me is the Bard model is you take whatever it is you do as an institution well, and you take that and you do it in prison. You don't try to do something else. You don't try to adjust what you're teaching to the needs or the tastes of the people incarcerated. You take whatever it is that your specialty is and you teach it at another site. And for Rhodes, to me, that's the search program. Bob will tell you, Bob was involved in writing the history of the search program back in the 90s, called Celebrating Humanities, right? So it's been around since 1946. Those of us who have taught in it, and students who have gone to Rhodes realize that it is a signature part of the Rhodes curriculum. It's one thing we do well, and it's distinctive. So it made sense to make that the centerpiece of our program. So that's kind of the Bard model. We're not interested in teaching everything or offering a BA degree. We're interested in, I guess for me, I'd put it this way, we're interested in testing the theory that liberal arts education is for everyone. Not just for rich kids who can afford to go to Rhodes, or people who see liberal arts education as something valuable to them, but people who have never considered going to college, people who have never heard of Plato or Aristotle or Epic of Gilgamesh, but people who can experience the liberating effect of these things. And that test, that sort of hunch has been borne out manyfold. That is, people respond to these texts, they're life-changing for them, they want to learn more, etc. So here's where there, according to the Alliance of Higher Education in Prison, here are all the places in the United States where there are higher education prison programs. And so you can see they're all over the place. Even the South, really as many in the South as there are in the Northeast and everywhere else. This is what the map in Tennessee looks like. So these squares are prisons. This is West Tennessee State Penitentiary. This is Northwest Tennessee State Penitentiary. This is Deborah K. Johnson and Riverbend, kind of superimposed. Northeast, one of these is Bledsoe, and the other one is something else. I can't remember this, names of those counties in the middle of the state. The programs this is the Rhodes program, this is the Lane College program, this is the Dyersburg State program. So one of the things that has gotten interesting about this work is that we now find ourselves in the same space as other programs. So Dyersburg State offers an AA degree, and Lane College is about to offer a BA degree in the very same space where we're teaching. To this point, there's been no cooperation, there's been no interaction, there are no relationships in terms of faculty or administratively. We don't, even though we're in the same region of the state, we don't have any interaction. We're completely different kinds of institutions. So the grant I'm working on right now is to try to change that so that we work together, these institutions work together, and that we can have stackable credentials so that the certificate Rhodes would count for the AA degree at Dyersburg State, which would count to the Lane BA, etc. So there's our program. So one of the things I've learned about this work is that you got to have partners, right? You got to have approval. You got to have good relationships. So the obvious place is the Tennessee Department of Correction, right? They got to be for you. It's sometimes hard to figure out who the right people to talk to and to befriend are. The person I was closest to was fired last week, so I'm now still trying to figure out where I go from here. Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology is the conduit through which the governor's money has gone to higher education prison. So they've got the money. So for instance, the computers we use at WTRC belong to the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. Those computers are overseen by the Tennessee Board of Regents. So another acronym enters the picture, right? So I've got to have a relationship with the person at the TBR who oversees the computers, which I do. The Board of Parole I've already mentioned, right? The interactions I've had with them. The Tennessee Higher Education Initiative is a nonprofit. So they are this sort of third thing. They're not an institution of higher education. They're not a government agency. They're a nonprofit with a lot of money that contracts with colleges, mostly community colleges, to offer degrees in these various places. It is imperative that we have a good relationship with THEI. And to this point, I've been able to maintain a good relationship, even though they've changed leadership and they have, there are lots of things. They're in Nashville, so they're aware of a lot of stuff going on that I'm not aware of. But they're another player. And then there's the Southern Higher Education Prison Collective. So this is a collective of practitioners in the southern states who are involved in this. I'm just starting now a committee on program delivery, where we're going to be talking about what are the advantages of in-person instruction versus online instruction versus remote Zoom instruction, because programs are all over the place. And of course, there are some competitors. So we just talked about this with Dyersburg State, Lane, and THEI, which is also kind of hovering around things. So this is the Liberal Arts in Prison program that I've described. Started off as a Great Books reading group. In 2019, became a certificate in Liberal Arts for credit. And we had graduations the last 2 years. I found this photo. Can you believe this, Bob? This is online. These are the sort of four horsemen of the man course, which began in 1946. Lawrence F. Kinney, John Osmond, John Henry Davis, Alexander Kelso. I'm sure you knew all of them.
I'm not that old.
No. You overlapped with some of them, didn't you? No?
John Henry Davis.
John Davis. So these are the people that developed the man course in the wake of World War II. The idea was that we came very close to extinguishing Western civilization. We probably ought to do something to preserve it. So this Great Books, I think it was called, what was it called? What was the first name? Remember before man? Something Great Civilizations or something, Great Centuries.
I think it's always been called.
Yeah, that was the second name. There was something else. Yeah, that was the second name. There was something else at the very beginning. The very first advertisement has another name, but it's not important. The man course is, as I've said, this sort of heart and soul of what Rhodes does and what it provides. And so it makes sense that this is at the center of what we do at the prison. So, 4 courses. What do we read in these courses, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. We start with the Epic of Gilgamesh. We read the Hebrew Bible, the Iliad, sometimes the Odyssey. We read Herodotus' histories and Greek drama. This will be familiar from anybody who's taken search recently. This is pretty much the first semester. The second semester, we read the Republic. Yes, we really read the Republic, Bob. And it was, we just did this last year, and yes, it was tough. Virgil's Aeneid, the New Testament. We do some Christian asceticism, Augustine's Confessions, and Boethius' The Consolation of Philosophy, which, by the way, this book is about somebody who's in prison and trying to console themselves or be consoled by philosophy as they try to understand why they're incarcerated and how they're supposed to live their lives. The third semester, we read the Quran, Chaucer, Dante, Luther and Calvin, Machiavelli, Shakespeare. You need to take a breath. The fourth semester, we read Paradise Lost, Adam Smith, Mary Shelley, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, Jean-Paul Sartre, Elie Wiesel, and Toni Morrison. So, do they get overwhelmed? Yeah, they do. Do we get overwhelmed as our instructors? Yeah, we do. Do students at Rhodes get overwhelmed? Yeah, they do. And one of the roles that Rhodes students play is when they come to them, they say, hey, this is what college is about. You get overwhelmed. You get behind. You don't do as well on the tests as you want to do, right? One of the roles that I think they can play, our undergraduates, is to socialize them into what it's like to be a college student, right? You failed the quiz. Guess what? It happens, right? Learn something from it. How did students get involved? In 2018, a student named Madison Zickgraf came to me and said, hey, I heard about this program you're doing. I'd like to be involved. I said, okay, well, I don't know if there's much you can do, but you can come and visit. So she came and visited, and she kept coming back, and the women really responded to her. And she got her friends involved, and then they started coming. And so we had, every week, we had 1, 2, or 3, usually young women who came and got involved. And so then in 2020, I decided I would teach a class on mass incarceration. And one of the requirements would be that the students in the class would visit the prison on Thursday nights, and they would serve as tutors with the students. And so now that's how we do it. In the fall, there's usually 18 students who serve in that role. And then in the spring, we'll recruit some others. So in a given semester, there are 18 to 20 Rhodes students who are active in the program now. So that's how that evolved. So
I was at 7 large books on that last slide.
yeah.
And how many weeks in the semester?
So we do 12 or 13.
Right, so that's, that's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time.
That's huge.
We do 2 weeks on most texts, 3 on some. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. And one of the things that we think about is, we keep telling ourselves, is we are going to treat them like college students. We're going to treat them like Rhodes students. We've accepted them into this program in the confidence that they can do their work. And if we have to back off, we do. But we found that they respond to the challenge. Let me just say this real quickly. So my goal going forward is for a graduate of the program to be released from prison and come to Rhodes full time. Thought I had the person for that role this last year. She was released. She went to Nashville, but then she got a boyfriend and got engaged, blah, 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 and so it's not going to work out. But there's another woman who's going to get out in 2023, I think, who will be the first student to come to campus. I need to be confident when this happens that she can do whatever is thrown at her at Rhodes, and I am. And that's really exciting because she's going to show everybody in that school what she's capable of doing, and it's kind of cool. There are some really smart people in prison. Maybe that doesn't surprise you. But people who, not only just smart, but people who never considered themselves as college material. It was never something their family stressed or thought they would do. And now they see a whole different future for themselves. So let me, yeah.
I'm guessing that you read selections from those books, not the whole thing, is that right?
No.
You read the whole?
Yeah. We read, in many cases, we read the whole thing. Yeah.
I never make it.
And here's the other thing.
No.
They actually do the reading. So if you talk to a Rhodes professor on the way back from prison, as I do every week, one of the things they'll say is, they actually did the reading. I know they actually did the reading because they came with questions. And that's amazing. And they also said, thank you for coming, have a safe trip home. Nobody ever says that at Rhodes, right? In class. So there's a kind of appreciation for what you're doing and a commitment to what they're doing that's really amazing and that you don't find anywhere else, frankly. And that's one of the attractions. Let me play this brief WKNO report that came out a couple of years ago.
Supposed to be easy. Lectures, final exams, and those dreaded term papers. Now imagine college without a computer, the internet, or even a college. As WKNO's Katie Reardon reports, those are just a few of the challenges faced by a group of students in Henning, Tennessee.
Henning, Tennessee, site of the Women's Therapeutic Residential Center. Sounds like a weekend retreat. It's actually a prison. 18 women are circled up around their teacher, textbooks open.
Herodotus' audience. Are they Lydians? Are they Persians?
The subject? Ancient Greek writings.
What Greeks in particular?
Athenians.
The Athenians.
Their classroom is an hour away from Rhodes College in Memphis, where students get the same lectures. This, after all, is a Rhodes College course, taught by Rhodes instructors and assistants. They drive here 2 days a week. It's part of the college's liberal arts in prison program, 4 humanities courses over 4 semesters. A passing grade comes with 12 college credits from a prestigious institution.
The thing it will give them most of all is a sense that they can be successful at college.
That's Dr. Steve Haynes, the program's founder. He says professors don't lower their standards for inmates, or residents, as they're called at the center.
We try to do everything we can to make them feel like college students. So the admissions process is they write an essay. They don't write an essay about how they got into prison. They write an essay about how they're going to help Rhodes fulfill its mission.
Their role in that mission differs from person to person, as some of these students are here for just a few years, others for life. Their academic limitations include no internet, no office hours with professors, and restricted prison rules. Yet for some, keeping up with their campus counterparts can be a point of pride. Here's 27-year-old Carly Mallard.
It's been a long time since I've actually done school, so the fact that I know I can do it now is just all the more for me to go out there and do it.
The classes ask questions about values and universal truths. What binds us together or tears us apart? They read epic poetry, philosophy, even the Hebrew Bible. Professor Joe Jansen says the class, for all students, is about expanding their worldviews.
Just to have to listen to people talk, defend their positions in a kind of safe environment does, I think, lead to a better citizenship.
It can also lead to a kind of intellectual escape.
That time that we're in that class is not prison time at all. We're totally somewhere else.
That's 49-year-old Christy. Per prison policy, we can only identify some residents by their first names.
When I come out, I'm so elated. I mean, it's just like, listen, no drug I've ever done compares to it.
Studies show that inmates in prison learning programs, vocational or otherwise, are around 30 to 40% less likely to reoffend after release. For Latasha Thomas, her payoff came early. This year, at a parole hearing, she was asked to define success.
I guess they thought that I was going to say money, cars, clothes, all these materialistic things. No. Success is measured by the ones that you love succeeding.
She borrowed that from Herodotus, the Greek historian she learned about in class. After 25 years behind bars, Thomas won her freedom. 95% of state inmates do eventually, which is why she says these programs benefit more than just the people inside.
Who do you want your neighbor to be? You want somebody that's robbing and killing? You might wake up in the morning with a gun in your face? Or do you want somebody to be out there with a book, with education?
One current student, Stephanie, says she'll be that person one day.
We're not just sitting around twiddling our thumbs, using up the state's resources. We actually want something for ourselves, and we're gonna get it.
And in 8 years, after she's released, she may get her chance. For WKNO News, I'm Katie Reardon.
So
how do they get all the textbooks? Who funds the money? Because I know textbooks are expensive. And it looks like you do a lot of reading.
yeah. So as of 2021, Rose has taken over the cost of the program, which is about $28,000 a year. So it's part of the Rhodes budget. So we're self-funded. One thing that's not paid for is the reentry when people get out, which hopefully will start happening. So if you're interested in being involved in this work, the thing that I need to start thinking about at this point is a place for women to live when they come to Memphis. None of them are from here. Perhaps jobs, right, for them to get their feet on the ground before they start becoming full-time students. So that's kind of where the development edge is right now. Can I show you one more quick thing? It's just like a 30-second picture of our graduation last year. So the women wanted graduation to be just like it was on campus. So one of the things they did is they painted painted a picture of, the Rhodes seal, and which you'll probably recognize if you went to Rhodes. It's in the middle of the what used to be called Palmer Hall, Southwestern Hall, cloister there. Oh, really? That Rhodes seal is made on butcher paper by someone who just saw a picture like on a mug or something. I know it's time to quit, but if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a little bit. Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. It's good to see everybody.
Thank you. Who are the women in the shirts off to the right?
So there are women in the program who have not graduated yet. Yeah.